Alright, it says we're live, so...
I got no buzz that we're live. We're live!
Good. It did work. I guess we should just
Hey guys, it's been so long since we've done this that we forgot how to do this. And we're trying it a new way because Google Plus forgot how to do it while we were absent. So, we're just confused and sad. We're together!
Yeah, we are together. I mean, you're like much more the focus of this than I am. I'm a tiny box in the corner, and you are a large box in the middle. So that'll be fun.
Super techno there for a second.
No. Can you hear me now?
Oh, this is gonna go fantastic.
Oh no. Things I can do to help that, maybe. Boop. Am I better now? No. Great. Perfect. Other things I could do, maybe. Is this better? Can you hear me? No? No?
Yeah, I can.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm just gonna leave this up so that I can watch it, maybe. Am I back to being all...
Yeah, okay. I can hear your full sentence.
Okay, good. That's what we want. Today we're gonna talk about Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. I have read it. Gretchen has not, and doesn't plan to. Or at least not purchasing it with your own money. You can come to my house and read it if you really want to, but...
Yeah, maybe September.
Yeah. So, when I made my original video, had a list of things I wanted to talk about. So, we could go by my list if you want, as just a way to do it. Some of these things I'll be able to speak to more than you will, because you haven't read the thing, but you can definitely join in on the discussion. The first thing I wanted to talk about was just my overall impression of the book, which was a 3-star book. Like, it's not terrible, it's not great either. It was it definitely read like fan fiction. A lot of people are saying that. It definitely had issues with characterization, in my opinion. I felt like several of the characters that I really loved were not well portrayed through what they were saying and doing. And I also feel like it suffered from the medium that it was written in. I feel like this would have been better as like a short story actually written by J.K. Rowling as opposed to a play. Now, I haven't seen the play. I don't think I will ever be able to see the play in its original way with the original cast. Maybe there will be like an off-Broadway production of it here that we can go see, but...
It's going to Toronto for this
Rude. Those Canadians get it first. God dang it. But still. Yeah, so I was like okay with reading it because it gives me a way to experience the play that I probably won't get to see properly. Does that make sense?
Yes. My reasons for not reading the book, even before it came out, the book, the text,
Before
it came out, I knew 2 things that apparently a lot of people didn't know, and I don't know how. But it's that A, it was not a novel, it was like just a transcript of the play, and B, that J.K. Rowling had written, and I automatically just got scared. I don't know, there was something about the title and the Cursed Child that I just like, I already just get the heebie-jeebies from this. I understand that it's J.K. Rowling approved, but that doesn't mean that it's good. That just means that she said, give me money. Which she's totally entitled to, but at the same time, I just knew that it wasn't going to be her style of writing it anyway, and I had no interest in it. And then after it came out, all of my friends who did get it that night read it and immediately flipped out about how terrible it was. So I feel like in that way I've read it, but just hearing the plot synopsis, just duck and cover.
Yeah.
How do you think it's gonna be?
Yeah. talking about the marketing, because you mentioned it a little bit, I did want to talk about how this was very much pushed as the 8th Harry Potter book, as if we were supposed to take it and like stick it past book number 7 on our shelves. And while it is the 8th Harry Potter story, they weren't technically wrong. It is the 8th story. I don't think that it goes on to the end of the Harry Potter books in my mind. As somebody who works in a bookstore and sold like 300 copies of this book in the first 2 days, that means our store got money, and that means that I get more hours. So I can understand why it was like sort of like, oh, this is a thing that we can sell and people will buy it. It helps the whole industry, not just, you know, J.K. Rowling. It does help all of the book industry. As much as we hate giant cash grab things, which this kind of is, it's like super, just like, this is a thing that was already done that we could sell to a lot of people. Alright. And I don't know if you know this, but they're actually now putting on pre-order the screenplay for Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Is that the one that's coming out in the... Yeah, the screenplay for it's up for pre-order now, so...
I mean, and there is something to it, because, like, as you said, you will probably never get to experience this play. I mean, even if it does come to New York, like, those tickets are going to be really expensive, and they're going to be sold out for a while, so this brings the play with more immediacy to people who will be able to access it, or, you know, anyone who, say, can't watch plays because, you know, they can't hear. You know, I know my friend was super excited that they actually, unlike a lot of the Harry Potter books, they released this in the Braille she reads immediately and not way after. So she was super excited about that, so that's really cool. But at the same time, I think there was just too much weight put on it, like as the 8th Harry Potter book for something that J.K. Rowling hadn't written herself.
Right, and I worked the midnight release. I was there. There were people who thought that, one, it was a novelization of the play, which it is not. It is literally just the script. And two, that J.K. Rowling, it's like the story that they used to make the play, which it is not. J.K. Rowling did write the plot of this, apparently, from what I understand, just not the like, actual dialogue and stuff. I see your face.
I mean, because I think we mentioned before we went live that the idea with, we are going for spoilers in this, right? Everybody knows this. Okay, so
it's a discussion. We're discussing. There will be spoils. Yep.
Clear for people like, the amount of time travel used, it completely undermines the all is well ending of, like, that. And, like, this is not how we were taught time travel works in the 3rd book.
Yeah.
It was something that you said before we went on, and I just, I started going through all the big hoopla with time travel and that, and I'm just like...
The idea in the 3rd book was, like, time travel because time travel happens from the future going to the past, that the continuity is always the same, that it has already happened, in a way. Whereas this story makes it seem like you can go back, change everything, fuck it up, go back and change it all back to the way it was originally, and have no consequences from that. And I mean, there was sort of this, like, Hermione says you're not supposed to talk to yourself, but that was less of a, it's going to drastically change the timeline, and more like, you'll probably go crazy, because you're not supposed to meet yourself. Whereas in this, it was like, nah, they fucked up the timeline, this is some Back to the Future shit right here. Literally to the point where Harry Potter is dead, and Voldemort has come to power at one point, so...
That's the antithesis of everything she wrote, and what made, I thought, the plot of The Prisoner of Azkaban so strong.
Yeah.
Like, that heart-wrenching moment where Harry thinks his father has cast the Patronus, but it's not. It's because Harry, later on in the book, will go back in time and save himself, and it's just like, oh, so good.
Yeah.
Time travel I don't hate.
Yeah.
And I feel like this book is literally just, like, everything you could hate about time travel. Plus, like, what are probably really good fan fiction elements if we weren't being told this was canon.
And so here's the thing. I did a brief discussion in the video I filmed that nobody will ever see, ever, where I compared this to a Harry Potter musical, which I love, and is a play based on the books, although it is based on the books themselves and has the plot of the 7 novels. It is able to do a lot of fan fiction-y things, like make fun of things and ship people, but because it's not sanctioned as, like, this is legit, we're perfectly fine with it, because we sort of accept it as fan fiction and not, we don't have to accept it into our canon. But a lot of people are very frustrated right now because they're being forced to believe that this story is legit and is real and happens, when a lot of us felt like our characters that we loved so much and have learned so much about aren't acting like themselves. We've missed so many things, and 3 is super ridiculous and breaks a bunch of the rules that we know exist in this world. The fact that it was legitimized is what's causing people to be upset. Because, like, if this was just a fan fiction, I would have enjoyed it. I would have accepted the flaws it had as just being a problem of the writers, not being, J.K. Rowling, but at the same time, I wouldn't have it. I mean, I don't read a lot of fan fiction, but, like, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't the most well-written thing I've ever read, ever.
Yeah, and I feel like, even just giving it licensing to be made kind of legitimize it in a way that most fan fiction isn't ever. But I feel like if at least, like, the cover didn't have her name on it,
bigger than the actual writers' names, too.
Yeah. Just own to the fact that, maybe this is her idea, and that's something I'll have to grapple with because Lily gets it. But, like, just own to the fact that she didn't write it. I would be a little bit more okay with its existence, but with the way that, like you said, it's bigger than the actual writers' names, the 8 Harry Potter book, like, just, no.
No.
I don't even know what else to say besides no.
I guess the only other thing I should say is, like, a lot, especially with Ghost at a Watchman last year, 2 years ago now, was that last year? When was that? Time ago, people were really upset and said that it tainted their understanding of How to Kill a Mockingbird, and I don't think that that's okay, and I don't think that this should do the same thing to the Harry Potter series for a lot of people. You don't have to read it. If you have read it and you don't agree with it, it's fan fiction. It wasn't written by J.K. Rowling entirely. It's like any number of, like, Sirius Lupin things I read when I was younger. It maybe applies to me in some aspects, and I'm taking it in and accepting it, and maybe in other aspects I don't agree with, and I don't accept that into my headcanon of what happened in the world. Maybe other things are weird, but you don't have to accept it just because J.K. Rowling said this is a legit thing. Like,
yeah, and, like, I think there are certain aspects that just make so much sense. Like, Hermione Granger is the Minister of Magic. Like, well, duh. What else was Hermione Granger going to go? She is the queen.
Yeah.
And, like, there are certain things about that make total sense, and I'm definitely okay with thinking about. And then, but just random things to me, because Albus Severus is sorted into Slytherin, right?
Yep.
That's the thing. Like, I automatically feel like because right before he went to school, he asked, like, what if I'm sorted into Slytherin? So I feel like that would automatically disqualify him from being sorted into Slytherin just by, like, the way Slytherins are portrayed in the books.
So, that was one of the other things I discussed. I'm a Slytherin. I have recently accepted this into my heart. And for a very long time, I was like, no, I'm a Ravenclaw. And all the quizzes were like, no, you're Slytherin. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm a Ravenclaw, I swear to God. And recently, I'm like, no, I'm actually definitely, yes, a Slytherin. But the reason I resisted it so much is because they get such a bad rap. Nobody wants to be a Slytherin unless you're, like, super evil. And we are not, and I am not. But it was really nice to read the story about sympathetic Slytherins. And Scorpius, best girl. best girl. Yeah, so it was nice to see sympathetic Slytherins. There is a timeline within the time travel bits. I think the first time they go back, when they come back, Albus Severus is in Gryffindor instead of in Slytherin. So they do sort of acknowledge this, where he wanted to prove to himself that he could be in Gryffindor, so the hat let him choose not to be in Slytherin. But the first time when he was actually put into Slytherin, I think it was because he would have rather be with Scorpius than not. Right?
Alright, so that's one thing then that we can say, because they give us sympathetic Slytherin, which I always felt was something not so great in the books, of just being how Slytherin was automatically it's where they corner off all the bad kids, and I mean that's definitely not a thing.
And the only Slytherins that you really get to interact with are Draco and Crabbe and Goyle, and they're not that Draco isn't sympathetic by the end of the book.
Yeah.
But
you can still tell why he was sort of in Slytherin in the first place.
Yes. They're very hoity-toity, those guys in Slytherin. So there was that. While we're talking about Albus Severus and Scorpius, queer baiting. A lot of people have been saying that there was purposeful queer baiting in this story of a romantic or sexual tension between the two of them, and then nothing ever actually coming of it at the end, whereas a lot of people would have felt like because of the fan-fiction-y elements of it, it was the play's way of being slash fiction, but not really, because that's not okay.
And this is where I just get I feel I know how J.K. Rowling would have done it, but because it wasn't her, because I can't file this book away under anything but fan fiction. I also would really like to know how familiar the writers they were with the tropes of fan fiction in general. Was this done
to be?
Because I also feel if you give that part to different actors, how would they portray it? We can read it one way, and two actors in the role continuously play it. So it's just
I would say it's very overt. They seem like they are in love with each other, very obviously in love with each other, and it's not they're just really close friends sort of love. There's things that are said that is are you trying to make it seem like they love each other? But then one of them ends up having a crush on Delphi, Voldemort's kid, and they make that into a thing, which one was weird because she was 20 something and he was 14. It was very uncomfortable that was happening at all. But I didn't know whether you didn't feel that sort of thing where he would develop this crush on her would make sense based on how he was interacting with Scorpius the whole time. Yeah.
In a way, I would feel just the concept of Harry and Draco's kid getting together, that does feel just, that's super fan fiction-esque, but at the same time, if that's how you develop the characters to be, you have to own it.
To be fair, so that was one of the things I also wanted to talk about. Draco's characterization and then his son's characterization. The plot arc that Draco has through the 7 Harry Potter novels brings him at the end of it to be kind of he realizes everything he grew up with and how his parents raised him isn't probably correct. And so he raises his son differently. But then in this play, a lot of the interactions he has with Harry and Ron and Hermione is very much still the stuck up, I hate you guys so much, you ruined my life type of personality. But at the same time, in the alternate universe where Voldemort wins and Draco's clearly super evil, when his son comes to him and is like, Dad, this is super not okay, and I'm trying to fight this, he's like, you're more like your mother than I thought you would be. So, like, he's like, in this weird situation where, like, he still accepts that maybe things were wrong, but doesn't, and at the end he's like, I really envied you guys having friends, because I only had Crab and Goyle, and they weren't really friends, they just followed me around because I was cool. And I was like, this isn't the Draco that I know. Like, he has no characterization. He's wishy-washy. Is he the Draco that's learned his lesson and is trying to be a better person, or is he full of himself? And it isn't like he's still working on it and trying to become a better person type thing. It's literally just depending on the moment he does what he wants. And that really bothered me, because I think that of all of the characters in Harry Potter, Draco's trajectory was like such a huge shift and like really interesting.
Yes, I think that when I watched the first movie, I just like learned to hate Tom Felton's face, because he did the moody small child so well. And I thought that when you cast actors that small, you never know what you're gonna get. And then like obviously through the books, it was so well done, and then to the movies, like I don't know, I think I fell in love with it more because of how well Tom Felton acted it out. And I was just like, this is actually really great. Like, I think over the course of the novels that the good guys don't change as much as some of the bad guys in the beginning, and that was super, super cool to see. So like hearing that just makes me happy.
And that's one of the things I mentioned, that I'm losing my voice. One of the strengths of the Harry Potter novels is that none of the characters are two-dimensional. They all have, like, really strong values and reasons why they do everything they do, be it good or bad. Even Voldemort, to an extent, is considered evil because of how he was conceived, whether or not you believe that's a strong enough argument as to why he would be so messed up. But at the same time, in this play, a number of characters were sort of dumbed down to a two-dimensional version of themselves. And part of me was saying, okay, maybe it's because it's a play and the actors are supposed to fill the rest of that out, but because these characters are characters that we know inside and out, we have seen their trajectory, we know their growth story, having them speak and do things in a way that doesn't jive with how we've learned that they have grown isn't good. Like, it's bad writing. You can't just have flat characters because the actors are supposed to bring stuff to it, because those characters have defined personalities and defined values.
I mean, like you said, just about Draco, like, he has such a strong character arc that you could read the books once, or even just watch the movies once, and, like, see it, and know it, and feel it, and so, I mean, you think that as writing that would be in their brain, like, would this Draco do this? Because you have to know that hardcore Potterheads are going to interrogate this. I mean, this is, in terms of, like, hardcore interrogation, you're doing a pretty, like, surface level, like, poke. And, I mean, we're already coming up with this stuff, and so it's just like, this isn't hard. There are 7 books there for you.
Source material, yeah.
Source material, character building, backstories, quirks, tips, things that, I mean, she did so well. Like, why?
There was an attempt, I will say, with the Draco thing, there was an attempt for why Draco is mad at Harry Potter and the rest of them in the beginning to the middle of this play, because his son is being put forth as like, oh, he must be Voldemort's kid because Draco never would have been able to have a kid with his wife because she was very ill, and then when she dies, Draco literally goes to Harry Potter in his office and says, you need to say that it's not true. You need to tell people. And Harry says, we actually can't take a stance on this, which is perfectly fine, but then like, that Draco is a Draco I would believe after the trajectory of the 7 books. A Draco who's just trying to raise his family, whose wife got very ill and he loved very much, and he loves his son, and his son's getting bullied, and the only thing he can think to do is to go to Harry Potter and say, please use your clout to help my son. And when Harry says no, because he's a government official and he can't actually do that, not because he wouldn't want to, he gets, like, grumpy about it, which I can see as being a Draco thing, but there's moments before that where he's super snooty and moments after that where it has nothing to do with how Harry responded to that situation. If it was all about how Harry keeps refusing to help Draco, and knowing Draco, he's very selfish, that would make sense, but it's not about that. It seems like he just is like, I'm just gonna hate them because I hate them. And I'm like, that's not true. Yeah. I wanted to just open so you can have that time. Yeah, my voice dies completely. I went on, like, literally a 10-minute rant about Snape because Snape is such a contested character. He seems to be one of these characters that people are like, oh, he was good because he had love in his heart. Or he was, like, a terrible person and, like, super creepy. And, like, he's terrible. Like, why would Harry name his son after him? Like, he's such a terrible person. And both of those, I feel, are incorrect readings of Snape. You can have your own personal opinions about Snape, that's fine, but I just want to say, like I was saying earlier, all of the characters in these books are well-rounded characters. You learn how and why they do the things they do. Severus Snape was picked on, an outcast, his one friend in the world, ends up marrying the kid who bullied him the most. He never was able to create proper interpersonal relationships. That was literally the only interpersonal relationship he had throughout what we hear of his childhood, aside from his parents. And so it makes complete sense to me that he would get super bitter about that, not understand that, even though we know, having learned all of this other stuff, that while the Marauders, when they were very young, were little shits, they sort of grew up and grew out of that phase and became better people as they, weren't 11-year-olds, which is often how people are. They grow up and become better. Oh, I'm being called. Who's calling me? No. So yes, they were growing up and they got better, but to Snape, they're always going to be his bullies, because when you're bullied by somebody, they're your bullies. That's what they are. And he got super bitter and super angry, and it led him to do a lot of things that he probably didn't think was right, but didn't think he had any other option. And then people would say, okay, well then why was he so mean to all of the students and, like, so abusive to Harry as Harry was there? And my argument then is he's still really shitty at interpersonal relationships, and he hates his job. Like, he's so good at potions, and Dumbledore's like, dude, you're like a potions prodigy. Why would you not want to be the potions teacher? And he's like, no, I have all this experience of defense against the dark arts. Let me be the defense against the dark arts teacher. And Dumbledore keeps like, nah, brah, nah. Like, he's got all of this anger and resentment inside of him, and he takes it out a bit on the kids, especially on Harry, because obviously, like, Harry is like a physical reminder of everything that went wrong in his life.
I think he just doesn't like children.
Yes.
It's a perfectly okay thing to just not like children. Like, there are professors who teach for forever and come to not like children, and that's just how they are. Like, you don't have to like children.
Right? And he's super strict, and he just wants people to do his potions lessons and have it be done with, and then he's got little Harry Potter being a little shit the whole time, and I'm like, I get it. I completely understand it. Should he have reacted differently? Probably, but from what we have learned of his trajectory throughout the books, it makes sense why he would react this way, especially to Harry, but to any kids in general. He's just bad with people. He just is. All people. I've never seen him interact with a person other than Dumbledore Baby, that was actually genuine. He's constantly putting on airs and like trying to be something that he's not. That's Snape. So that's my feelings on Snape. Is he a perfect character? No. Does he do bad things? Yes. Is it justified? A little bit.
Why was this spurred on by Harry Potter and the Cursed Child?
Because Snape shows up and is alive in the Voldemort rules point, and he sacrifices himself again so that Scorpius can basically get to the Time Turner and get back and maybe fix things. So people were very upset. They're like, why do they keep making Snape the hero and he keeps sacrificing himself? He's a terrible person. And I'm like, because he's not a terrible person. He's a person who made mistakes.
And a person who can't person all the time. Like, he's not... All people cannot function, like, in interpersonal relationships. It's just... doesn't how the world works.
Doesn't.
I can't function this conversation.
Yeah. So yes, I wanted to say that all of the characters are not black or white. Often the bad characters, Snape is a red herring for like the first third of that series. Harry's like, it's definitely Snape. He's definitely the evil one, and every single time Snape's like, no. I'm just bad at talking. So I don't know how to show that I care. Yeah, so, and Draco, another one. Even, the little glimpses we get of Draco Malfoy's mother, you can see how Draco is conflicted about what's going on because she's conflicted about what's going on. Like, his dad is very much, no, I'm a Death Eater, I got this. But his mom is like, that might not be the only option, and you can sort of see how Draco wanted to live up to his father throughout the books, and then slowly is kind of going like, no. No.
Narcissa brought down Voldemort. Like, if when she went to go check if Harry was dead, if she was on board with the Death Eater thing 100%, she would be like, this dude's still alive. You gotta hit him.
Hit him again. She cared more about protecting her son than anything else, and that led to character growth both for her and for the plot of the books and for Harry and for Draco. Like, you
it's
don't.
So human.
Yes,
like,
and
what I love, like even the Death Eaters, them that are like really black and white. Like, I love Pain, but like any character that you spend a little amount of time with, just like
you see them doing human things instead of doing things that are expected of them and expected of people in children's books. The other thing I wanted to say, Trolley Witch scene, best scene. So many people are so mad. They're like, that was so dumb. And I'm like, no, it was ridiculous and I loved it. just it was very much a, what if the Trolley Witch was actually the security system for the train? And part of me is like, yes, yes. I'm into it.
Not.
Yes. However, I did feel that after her monologue about how she prevented James and Sirius from jumping off the train, and then Fred and George Weasley from jumping off the train, that she would just let these two boys jump off. Like, they literally just jump off. Like, they don't even fight her. They just leave. And I'm like, what? Those other kids definitely would have been able to jump off if these two punks could. To be fair, Scorpius has maybe one of the best lines at that moment, which is, as fun as you clearly look, I'm just gonna leave. And I was like...
That's gonna be my outline for, like, the year. As fun as you clearly look, I'm just gonna...
And I was like, you are the best tiny child, I love you so much. So yes, everybody needs more of him in their lives. I loved his character. His character had the best characterization, I think, in the whole thing. I also mentioned in my video how Ron was sort of dumbed down to the comedic relief at moments, and while yes, Ron is sort of just an oaf a fair amount of the time, there's a lot more to Ron than that, and like every single iteration of Ron is just, it's like he's completely unable to do the things that he actually wants to do in life and is just following what everybody else says, whether that be what Hermione says, what Harry says, what Padma Patil says, like, all of these things, and he's just unable to do anything for himself, which I don't agree with. Ron would have been able to. He was very stubborn and, like...
Chessie from the Sorcerer's Stone. Like, that is the, like, crowning moment of Ron, just being like, I know that I can't win this, but I'm good at this, and I can try.
Yep.
And I mean, like, just that like, bravery, but also just willingness to just do the thing that needs to be done, even if he thinks he can't do it.
But I think the one thing that they kept saying throughout this play is because every single time that he's like that, it's because he's not married to Hermione. In every other alternate universe, he's not married to Hermione, and then one of the kids says something, and they end up professing their love to each other again. And I'm like... They're always like, I've loved you the whole time. And I'm like, so you're saying that the only reason Ron would ever be able to be successful in life is if he's married to Hermione? That's not necessarily true. She is definitely way more successful at being a person than he is, but that doesn't mean that he would just become this mopey, comedic oaf for the rest of his life. It doesn't make sense.
It wasn't Hermione with the chess scene. Like, I feel like people are disregarding what Hermione fell into, and I think it was that, like, sometimes stupid, but just very present bravery and loyalty.
Mm.
So, like, I mean, I never, like, Ron is definitely my least favorite character in the trio, but that doesn't mean that, like, I don't totally respect him. I'm just, like, I mean, I'm a Hermione person, but, you know.
I feel like most people who loved Harry Potter are a Hermione person. I don't know. So, yeah, we've been talking for over half an hour now. Is there anything else? I think that was everything that I wanted to talk about.
Well, as long as you got, I mean, I was just here to hear your thoughts and, like, offer my own.
Yeah. And we didn't even really touch on the main antagonist of this story, and we didn't even really touch on, like, the actual kerfuffle of, like, all of how the time travel stuff, like, the logistics of how that messed with the world, and, like, how some of that was super unbelievable, but, yes.
I mean, I think that it's just, like, I can't even, like, consider those things, because, like, Voldemort's kid, time travel, like, I mean, I think I've read good fan fiction about that already. Like, why? Why? I just, like, prefer to think it was not
And like I said, if you're gonna read it for Albus Severus and Scorpius' super awesome relationship that totally should have been outwardly homo-romantic and not just sort of implied heavily and then negated at the end. It's not cool, man. It's not cool. So yes, there's that. That's our discussion. If you have more comments, leave them in the box below and we'll talk about it, because there's definitely more things to talk about with this, so we just could probably talk forever about how grumpy we are. But again, it was super quick. There were things that I really loved about it. There were a lot of things that were very problematic. It's fanfiction. That's generally how it goes with that. Accept it into your headcanon or not. That's your decision. I also probably should reread the Harry Potter series because I have only ever read them once. The first time I read them as I was growing up. Yeah.
Alright.
Yeah.
I mean, you are also I read them once and then I was like,
Yeah, no, I only ever read them once. We've mentioned on this channel that I'm not a big rereader. And even Pendragon, which I love, I read once. The first time I reread it was when we were reading it for Nostalgia Junkie. So, like, I'm just not a big rereader. I don't do that, but having...
I think we're going to have another discussion about rereading. Next time on Michaela and Gretchen actually talking to
Remember when we did this thing, like, once a week, where it was the two of us?
Remember when our lives were falling apart?
Yes. I remember that. Alright. So that's it. We will talk to you guys when we talk to you guys.
We have a couple of reviews we have to do sometime, someday.
Yeah,
They'll get done. We promise. Maybe.
we promise. Bye!